As a creative, you've no doubt experienced that sensation of an idea arriving to you from out of the ether, like a spark. It feels like a gift, pure, inspired, full of energy and possibility, and you feel a tingling rush of excitement to get your hands on it and work it into form in the real world. And so you set to it, and it's going well for a while, but somehow over time, something feels off about it. It's falling short of the vision you had for it, which is incredibly frustrating because no matter what approach you take with it, you can't put your finger on why it feels so echoingly hollow. At a certain point, you release it to the world and it's good. Don't get me wrong, you're pleased enough with it, but it doesn't feel a patch on the intense wave of energy by which it arrived. It doesn't endure, and you're not surprised. You're left vaguely wondering what was missing that could have made it truly unforgettable. In this video, I'm going to explore why brilliant creative ideas can become so forgettable by the time we finish with them, and why it might have nothing to do with a failure of skill. My argument is that all creative work is subject to a force called entropy, and the defense against this all-pervading force is an anti-entropic tool called an armature, which is something we can return to every time we touch our creative work. If you find yourself ruminating on thoughts like this in connection with your creative work, I invite you to join the journal. It's a free occasional email newsletter and a deeper layer to my explorations into the creative acts from my own personal journals. I unpack what makes for a meaningful and enduring creative career and consider how creatives can navigate the income creativity continuum intentionally. I'll leave a link in the description if it interests you to join. The first time I saw this idea of entropy was in a breakdown of the movie industry, a video on YouTube called The Marvelization of Cinema by Thomas Flight on the channel Like Stories of Old. I'll leave the link in the description to this video down below. I would summarize the main point he makes in this video essay to be: don't put anything in the movie that doesn't serve the core idea or point of the movie, as to do so moves the story towards entropy, disorder, or in his words, raw, focusless content. He described this phenomena in cinema as being a term he made up called storytelling entropy. And though he may have coined that term very specifically, what appears to me that he's describing is a manifestation in the movie industry of a known force in the universe, the second law of thermodynamics. Though we can't at this point support the theory that creative systems follow physical systems in this way, for the purpose of this video, I'll use it as an explanatory lens, as I think it's a really helpful way to approach our craft. By this law, in a closed system, entropy, or the measure of disorder, randomness, and scattered energy, always increases over time. Essentially, when things are left to themselves, they don't stay organized. Things will never spontaneously move towards order and organization. They'll will move towards chaos and entropy. Buildings will crumble, heat disperses, and stars will burn out. What if this law is continuously at work upon our creative work too, in the same way that it is upon the physical world, where unless we continuously inject massive conscious energy into the creative system of our work, entropy will exert its dominance upon it. When this happens, the manifestation of our creative genius disperses and our work is rendered just another sea of forgettable and disposable variables, rather than that tightly organized and cohesive composed work of art we aspired for from the outset. Chaos is free, my friends, but order is expensive, and it's up to us as the hands at work on our creative projects to make them anti-entropic. We must enforce our distilled creative ideas and creative order as it's the only thing that gives our finished artifact a chance of being unforgettable. So, what is the nature of this anti entropic force we must bring forward? The antidote to our work falling into chaos, randomness, and disconnection. In my opinion, it's the armature. I discovered this idea of an armature from Brian MacDonald in his fantastic book about storytelling, Invisible Ink. I'll leave the link in the description. Brian first came up with this idea of the armature through working with sculptors who, before they put any mass or brought any shape to a sculpted art piece, would create a kind of skeleton. This skeleton, called an armature, lies beneath the surface of the sculpture and is the foundation upon which every aspect of the sculpture hangs. The observer doesn't see the armature, but without it, the whole piece would sag, lose its shape, and become unrecognizable. The armature is as much a part of the sculpture as every other part of it, even though it's invisible. Brian translated this idea across to great storytelling craft. Though you can't see a story's armature without it laying beneath the surface, the whole work will have no shape or stature. Your creative work's armature is, in Brian's opinion, a provable or disprovable sentence that informs your decisions as you are crafting the creative piece. It's the point of the story, the reason why it exists. In olden times, when referring to, say, children's storybooks, this would be called the moral of the story, usually. Many creators think that their creative work is organized because their armature has a vibe or a subject matter. But in Brian's words, saying your work is about competition or regret doesn't postulate anything any more than saying that your armature is red. It literally doesn't say anything. It can't be proven, it can't be disproven through your creative choices throughout the piece. And therefore, from the perspective that I'm offering here, it leaves the piece exposed to the environmental drift of entropy. In Brian's opinion, it's best to build upon your armature, which is likely why the sub-headline of his book is Building Stories from the Inside Out. At one point in the Marvelization of Cinema video, Thomas Flight makes a similar assertion using the example of the Lord of the Rings movies. He argues that these movies are some of the best created precisely because they were created from the inside out. They were built on the passion and borderline obsession of the original creators, longing to distill down a perfect manifestation of their vision into the creation of the best creative artifacts they possibly could. They were, without saying it, anti-entropic. Their singular, distilled vision generated so much internal momentum that the logistical, chaotic world, so studios, budgets, actors' schedule, was forced to bend and adapt to that core. Whereas movies like The Hobbit, which were even made by the same studio, tend to come into being from the outside in. The story is considered in a broader context, considering financial goals, marketing goals, franchises first, and somehow managed to miss the mark, even though all the ingredients were there to craft another masterpiece. So we see that unforgettable and enduring creative works have a creative heart that moves from the inside out, and forgettable and disposable creative works, not always, but often operate by corporate logic, forced energy from the outside in. And this falls exactly in line with this thermodynamics lens. If you want a system to resist the cold, chaotic environment outside, it must possess an immense internal energy source, like a star, for example. When a creator operates from the inside out, they must apply immense energy to the creative system they are building to ensure their vision for the work is so concentrated, pure, pressurized, and distilled that this energy radiates outwards. In this way, the idea forces the external environment to organize itself around the idea's core. And at the core, the thing that allows a creator to make these distilled choices is their knowing what the armature is, that central, structured, organized, and naturally anti-entropic center. The mission is to devote themselves to it fiercely in the face of this outside influence that wants to guide it into dispersion, chaos, or, well, entropy. To be clear though, all the examples I'm giving in this video are stories from movies, but in my opinion, all creative artifacts are trying to convey a unified story of some kind, even if both the creator and or the audience are unaware of what exactly that story is or struggle to put it into words. Take, for example, the case study I did a while back on a band that never sold out. I'll put the link here somewhere above me or below. What I'm seeing now, and that I didn't have words for when I made that video, was that the band is essentially anti-entropic in their creative process. They served the work and the story that it sought to convey to the audience first. This being the case, we can therefore extrapolate that all creative work will be subject to this disorderly influence of storytelling entropy. And so all creatives, whatever their medium, will find this second law lens still a helpful one to adopt, and their active defense against its entropic effects is the armature. Being anti-entropic doesn't mean work has to be stripped back and simplistic. You can still use nuance, complexity, and demonstrate exceptional intricacy and skill when used in conjunction with the armature. It simply means that every addition or subtraction to the work serves the armature, and if it doesn't, then it's naturally entropic, dispersing that fiery creative core of the work and tending it towards chaos. However, chaos is a temptress. When we look at Thomas Flight's examples of entropic storytelling, we see he gives examples of franchise building, where movies aren't closed, compressed systems, let's say, but elements are logistically set up within the work solely as a launchpad for future movies. Entropic story elements tend to trigger this instant, guaranteed emotional response by borrowing from past connections already in the audience's mind. For example, Thomas Flight introduces us to nostalgia baiting, which is shoving in these references that don't serve to add depth to the work at hand, but prioritize superficial recognizability for the audience. There's also the creative safety mechanism of undercutting a tender and sincere emotional moment with a dismissive or avoidant comment.
Is that like really corny?
So corny.
In such moments, the creator is actively letting their anxiety rush outside in to cool down the scene, because high emotional stakes and vulnerability is terrifying. All this serves to erode the cohesion of the creative system as a whole and make it lukewarm and forgettable. So why do creators inject these elements when they don't serve the story? It's risk. It's lower risk to create what's known, likely gets predictable results in a commercial market, and shields the creator from potentially being laughed at. It's easier to do that than it is to create an original piece of standalone creative work that feels like it's been pulled forward from their essence. By the second law, entropy is the default. Energy wants to move from the outside in. Systems naturally seek the path of least resistance to reach a stable, lukewarm state of equilibrium with their environment. These low energy temptations are what the creator must war against in order to create work with a fiery heart that is built to last, like the star that can burn bright for millennia. So how does the armature serve to make your creative work anti-entropic? Well, let's look at a low entropic example given by Brian McDonald, The Wizard of Oz. The armature, or the point this movie seeks to prove, could be said to be, you might already have what you've been looking for, which is continuously expressed by Dorothy in the phrase,
"There's no place like home."
We see every aspect of the movie is sculpted around this armature, from the scarecrow having the brains, the Tin Man having a heart, and the lion having the courage, and Dorothy having everything she ever needed back at home in Kansas, not over the rainbow as she believed originally at the opening of the movie. Through necessity, to make the armature more useful to me, I've taken this idea one step further and turned it from a static guiding phrase at the heart of a piece of work, such as you might already have what you've been looking for in the example of Wizard of Oz, to an operational phrase that I actively use to defend my work from the effects of entropy. In my video, Every Creative Needs a Thesis, I'll link this above or below, I presented the idea that your thesis is your long-term compass in your creative process, like a check filter for your as yet unformed creative ideas and whether to move ahead with them. My personal thesis, which is 10 years long, is what is the true nature of uncompromised creative force and how can it be applied to produce artifacts that endure and compound? All creative ideas I have go through this thesis filter if they ever want to stand a chance of being turned into a video. The armature, on the other hand, is what guides each self-contained piece of creative work you produce once this thesis filter has been applied to the idea. I swiftly realized that if I want to avoid that feeling of selling out, that feeling of feeling icky and like you've compromised more and more until what you're producing feels no longer like it's your own, or like I've now come to realize entropy has taken over and rendered it a mess of random disconnected bits, then I couldn't leave it at just creating the armature from the outset. I needed that armature to be an active and operational tool that I use to defend the work from entropy as I'm creating it. For instance, as metrics might feed back and tell me, you need to change this or that in order to get more views, or as I've heard that such an angle over here would be really popular right now, so you should take that, bend your armature in the moment to comply with that. But what I've come to see is that the story of the creation needs to move from the inside out. So starting with the armature first and then build from there. I can't let outside influence come in and work from the outside in to bend the armature, because then something essential is lost from the work. Entropy is working its way into the burning creative heart of what I'm building, cooling it down. And so as I'm actively sculpting my creative work, a non-negotiable is that no outside influence can incite me to change the armature, and any suggestions for change or improvement must serve the armature. In this way, I can use the armature as an active operational lens throughout the process of bringing a creative artifact into form to keep me focused and in service of the work each time I touch it, as opposed to being this pre-decided point that I hope carries the work through to its completion. In this video, I originally set out to explain to you how I found it important to not only have an armature for your work, but use it operationally. I read Brian McDonald's work years ago, and in trying to find a way to uncompromise creative work, I committed to this idea that I'll negotiate on anything with external feedback, but don't touch my armature. I couldn't for the life of me at the time tell you why I felt like that was important. My intuition just told me that it was. But this investigation has clarified that why for me. Thomas Flight's video introduced me to this idea of entropy, which unknowingly, it made that connection in my mind, this idea of the second law of thermodynamics. And that lens, though unprovable, offers this really useful universal analogy for what's happening under the surface. My creative system isn't closed. It's in relationship with a broader context and is likely subject to being watered down, rendered chaotic, and what felt like extraordinary and as a creative spark has somehow managed to be born manifest as this profoundly ordinary and forgettable piece of work. Its concentrated energy dispersed to the wind. Though Brian McDonald told me to come up with an armature, I intuitively felt it needed to be more than that, this operational defense of the creative work. Now I understand the reason why, to fight the ongoing effects of entropy. So here's what I know so far. Your thesis is the guiding compass for your overarching and ongoing creative inquiry, and resolves internal conflict so you have the energy for the journey. Your armature is your purpose for each creative piece and your defensive weapon to protect it, entropy is the antagonist. Your compass guides you and gives you energy, and your weapon defends you against the antagonist as you head towards your creative goal. Now we're really stepping into our creator hero's journey. Let me know in the comments if any of this strikes a chord within you, and if so, how. And if this video really speaks to you, I really recommend that you go back and watch my video about the thesis, as this is the umbrella under which the Armature lives and is really the prequel to everything we've been exploring today. Thank you so much for joining me all the way to the end, and I will see you in the next video.